Well, today's hearing will determine whether or not Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former White House chief of staff, will actually be allowed to be tried in the court of Fulton County, or will this be a federal issue? Now, of course, a lot is riding on the line here because determining how this case is determined will decide whether or not John Eastman, who was the architect of all of this effort to try to overturn the 2020 election, if he will also be allowed to actually move his case to the federal level. And then, of course, that gives Donald Trump enormous ammunition to also continue to try to delay these cases.
What's the difference between moving it from county to federal level, apart from the fact, I guess, that if he was convicted and then became president, he could pardon himself if it was a federal crime, couldn't he?
Well, that's true. And also, too, the biggest issue is Donald Trump believes that because, of course, he did appoint a number of federal judges to the bench, that actually gives him a lot of leeway, particularly with judges, because he believes because he appointed them to the bench, then that gives him the opportunity to get cases to move his way. In fact, one aspect of this is to just look no further than the case in Florida, where there are those who believe that the judge has had her finger on the pulse for Donald Trump. We know that she was heavily rebuked by an appellate court. However, if this case does stay within the Georgia court system, that means there are no protections that will be afforded to Donald Trump, even if he is elected president of the United States.
And Eric, it is the most extraordinary timeline that we're starting to see forming before us, isn't it? I mean, we're going to be entering the final stages of this presidential campaign, and Donald Trump is going to be sitting in courtrooms facing trial up and down the country.
That's right. But also, we know that at least one of these co-defendants in this Georgia case has already invoked the right to a speedy trial. Now, we know Fani Willis, the prosecuting attorney, has already, prior to that, she had already stated that she wanted to see this trial, this case go to trial by May of 2024. With Kenneth Chesebro, one of the co-defendants, now invoking this right to a speedy trial, she has actually moved that date up to October of 2023, which means if in fact this case does go to court before in October, we could actually possibly see this case in court even before the first ballots are actually cast in Iowa or New Hampshire. And of course, that could have a tremendous impact on Donald Trump's march to the White House.
Isn't it interesting, though, Eric, that in all of this, we're just talking and assuming that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee? I mean, it almost seems like a done deal, doesn't it? Which is remarkable.
Well, it certainly does, particularly given how far Donald Trump is leading in the polls. In fact, we just got new information that Donald Trump raised nearly $5 million in the immediate aftermath of his surrender here in Georgia. That's a record for Donald Trump in raising money in just under a day. So what we're seeing here is Donald Trump continues to lead in the polls as well as in the ability to raise money. And right now, none of the other GOP candidates have shown an ability to actually be able to cut into that lead. And so until they can prove that they do, this looks more and more like a coronation and not a nomination.
And how do you think that photo this week of Donald Trump, the first that we've seen, the mugshot, what do you think that's done for Team Trump? What do you think it's done for his base? Or do you think the optics of that have actually changed things for him now?
Well, it certainly does change things for the United States. We're talking about the American democracy, and we're talking about an individual who is now a defendant, a criminal defendant, who is actually leading in the polls for one of the major two-party systems to actually be the next commander in chief. So this does, I think, cause many questions where the United States is headed. But in terms of what it means for Donald Trump, at least in the short term, this is actually, again, a boost to his candidacy, not a detriment.